Hello, I'm Dennis Galecki. Welcome to the 609th Imagine Greater Buffalo program since 2010, and with 220 Imagine programs on the Buffalo and Erie County Public Library YouTube channel. Today's program continues that, and it's our ninth on our new ImagineLifelongLearning.com YouTube channel. This program is created by the Center for the Study of Art and Architecture, History and Nature, or C-SAAHN, as I like to pronounce the acronym, and also by ImagineLifelongLearning.com. Our lifelong learning speaker today is Chuck LaChiusa, webmaster for BuffaloAH.com and co-founder of Explore Buffalo. And Chuck is also a retired English teacher at City Honors. Chuck's website, BuffaloAH.com, the AH stand for Architecture and History, is widely used by locals as well as those well beyond Buffalo, all interested in architecture and history. It is also the home of C-SAAHN. The C-SAAHN website is located on Chuck's homepage. Today's program is about Assumption Church, officially called Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary Church. It is located near Grant and Amher Street in the Black Rock neighborhood in North Buffalo. So, Chuck, tell us something about this important Buffalo landmark.
Well, let me first say that this presentation will focus on the architecture and the art of the building. As Dennis just mentioned, everything that you are going to see and hear is on my website, Buffalo Architecture and History. So if you click on Buffalo Buildings and Sites on the left there, you would come to be a list of close to 1,000 buildings in Buffalo that I have photographed and documented. But enough of that. Here is the building that we are focusing on today. So in the far left of the picture, that is the Assumption School. And then, of course, there's the church. And in front of the church, on this photograph, that red building, that is the rectory for the pastor there. And then in the far right of this photograph, a little yellow building, that's actually the building where an artist who worked here lived for a year. And I'll get to that in just a few minutes. So a little history here. As Dennis said, this is located on Amherst Street in Buffalo. It was the third Polish Catholic church in the city. Okay, it was actually demolished when the second building, the one we're talking about today, was built. So again, the church today that we're looking at was, believe it or not, constructed and paid for in 1 year. That's hard to believe given today's circumstances. Architects, the local Buffalo architects, and the style was Romanesque revival. Now this, of course, relates to the Roman Empire, Roman architecture, and the two things that really characterize Roman architecture. One is the use of concrete, and the other is the use of arches. The empire was conquered, Rome, towards the end of the 5th century, but the empire actually did not cease because it was revived in the east, the Byzantine Empire. For about 300 years after Rome had been conquered, there was very little development in terms of architecture. About the 8th century, art commerce picked up and so forth, and building started taking place again, and the Roman styles were copied. Okay, in the middle of the 19th century, Romanesque revival took place, and a number of churches in this style were built. Okay, so here's the facade on the left, and you see these fabulous twin towers. Notable rose window or wheel window to be more specific, and so forth. And then on the right, we see the distinctive tops of the towers. So at the very top, we have a finial. Here it is a Latin cross style, many different kinds of crosses. This one, plain one, is referred to as Latin. And then below that, we have a lantern. And you can see that his openings and light actually goes through there, and a little light comes down into the church building. That's the purpose of the lantern. It's more decorative. And then below that, you see the copper cupola. And then below that, the louvers, that's where the bells are. So that's the belfry. And of course, you know the expression, bats in the belfry. Okay, here is the rose window, or more specifically, the wheel window. This is the earliest style of rose window. And you can see the stained glass here. And you'll notice that it's a geometric design. It's not a scenic or figurative design. And we'll take a closer look in a few minutes at the geometric design here. So, of course, on the other side of this is the organ loft. Okay, here's the entrance. And notice near the top of the photograph, there's a series of rounded arches. Okay, the Roman or Romanesque rounded arches. And then the three entrances, again, have the three rounded arches. Okay, here's a close-up of one of the doors. And at the very top, you have those angled bricks. The term there is voussoir. Below that, you see the rope molding. And then go down a little further, you see a half wheel window, okay, over the door. Flanking the door, you have Roman or Tuscan columns. Now notice the shaft, middle section, is rounded, it's plain, as opposed to the Greeks, who had fluted or grooved shafts. The doors, oak doors, notice the patterns there, those are four leaves, quatrefoils. Okay, going to the left of the building, we see the east elevation. On the far left of the picture, that rounded building, that's the apse. I'll show you another picture in a minute. To the right of that, the part that juts out and extends upward over the roof, that is the transept, okay? And there's another transept on the other side, opposite this, the other side of the building. So there are two transepts. To the right of the transept is the nave. And you see a terracotta roof, and you see two rows of windows. The top windows, the clear story windows, has geometric pattern, which I'll show you later. And the lower row has scenes from the life of Jesus. Okay, let's take a closer look at the roof. So this is terracotta, clay. And the Romans used terracotta roofs. And believe it or not, if you go to Italy, you might be able to see some original Roman terracotta roofs. It's rather amazing. At the bottom of the roof, you notice those horizontal pipes. This is Buffalo. That's a snow guard. Okay. And then below that, again, a series of rounded arches. That's called a corbel table. All right. Okay. That rounded apse that I mentioned, this is it from another angle. It's the school on the right. And notice the roof. It's a cone-shaped roof. It's actually a half cone, half conical roof. But here you see, one side of it. And again, at the top of the apse, you see the rounded corbel table. This is what it looks like sunset. Kind of impressive, I think. Okay, let's go inside the building. Let's go inside the apse, which is where the sanctuary is. Okay, look at the roof there. Notice I said, the conical roof, half cone. So that's a ribbed vault. See the white vertical ribs there. But you also see some smaller rectangles inside there. So this is the dome, but it's a half dome. It's a semidome. And below that, you see sections. Okay, you've got the rounded arches and the columns. So each one of those is a section, is a bay. And each of those bays has two murals. There's a round one, and then below it, there's a seam. Okay, those are sgraffito murals. Before we talk about sgraffito, let me quickly show you a detail of the roof. So this is wood with paint on it. And each of those rectangular sections is referred to as a coffer. Okay, here we go. So here are these sgraffito murals. There's the altar in the foreground there. Okay, so these murals were painted by Joseph Sawinski, Polish. Visited the United States for a couple of years, went back to Poland, and then in 1964, the people building this church invited him to Buffalo. And for 1 year, he lived across the street. Remember I showed that yellow building initially? So there it is. So that's where he lived for 1 year. And afterwards, he remained in the Buffalo area. And actually, he lived in Niagara Falls. Home's still there, actually. And interestingly, little or no English. Okay, so sgraffito, what are we talking about? Well, the top of this picture is an example of sgraffito from Florence. This is the Medici Palace. And there are two colors of, there's two colored plaster colors. You find this throughout Europe, two colors, black or gray with white. Now, the way this is done is the following. Have a wall, you cover the wall with plaster, colored plaster, usually black. Could be white, usually black. After that dries, you then put on a thin coat of an opposite color, white. And then you scratch out, you remove, you rub out the white that you don't want, okay, leaving this design behind it. Okay, now throughout Europe, as I say, you find this, but it's two colors. This artist in the United States developed it using four colors. And he has worked throughout the country. And as far as I know, he's the only one who was able to do this using four colors, four sgraffito murals. Number of his murals throughout the Buffalo area. Go to my website. You can find photos and information about many others. Okay, so let's take a look at each of the bays. So each bay has a rounded sgraffito mural at the top and then seen below. Each of the rounded murals is a symbol of Christ. Okay, so here we have peacocks above and then the Assumption. Important to have this because name of the church, the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin. Let's look at these in detail. Here's the peacocks. Now, peacocks traditionally have been a symbol of immortality. And here we have Christ being immortal, resurrection, and so forth. So peacocks are sometimes seen as symbols for Christ. So here's the Assumption. You have the angel Gabriel on the right announcing to Mary that she is pregnant, Virgin Mary pregnant, the Annunciation. And notice the halo that Mary has. Usually saints have halos, but in this case, in addition, the archangel is a halo also. There's a close-up. Again, four colors, four different layers. Amazing. Okay, next to it, to the right, another bay. We have the sacrificial lamb, Lamb of God. Again, another symbol for Jesus. And then you have, the manger scene, the birth there. So here's a close-up of the manger scene, notice the shooting star, Sgraffito. Pretty mature baby there, the barn animals. Okay, going one over. We have the Assumption. When Mary dies, she is assumed into heaven. And above that, you have an unusual design. You have the host with IHS on it. And then below that, there is a chalice. And then you have the letter A, which represents the alpha at the beginning. On the right, it does not look like the end of the alphabet. It's upside down. So alpha and omega. Not quite sure what's going on there. But anyway, it's the, obviously host, symbol, Christ. And here is the Assumption. Now, notice that there is an almond-shaped shape around Mary. Okay, this is called a mandorla. It comes from the Italian, which means almond. It's supposed to be an almond shape. Okay, now, if there's a halo around the entire body, that's called an aureole. If it's an aureole with an almond shape, it's a mandorla. Jesus is depicted with mandorla. Mary is depicted with mandorla. Those are the only two. So it's sort of a special here. Okay, moving over. After Jesus is born, you have the flight into Egypt, but above that you have pelicans. And pelican is a symbol for Christ also. Supposedly pelicans, they can't find enough food for their chicks. They will scratch their chests and they will bleed, and the pelicans, the chicks, will eat from the blood. So body and blood, Jesus, communion, and so forth. So the pelican also is seen as a symbol for Christ. So here's two close-ups. Joseph on the right. Okay, next over, we have above the removal from the cross, Mary with her dead son Jesus. Above that, there is a fish. Okay, now fish was when Christianity was illegal. Okay, before it was legalized in the Byzantine Empire, it was a term, and first letter of each of the words in the term spelled out fish. So this was a symbol for Christians. Okay, and here's again Jesus. After he died, he's removed from the cross, and there is Mary grieving. Okay, now, mentioned the transept before. That part that juts out on the sides. So if you look at this photograph, on the lower right, you can see that the pews are facing the front of the church. So on the far left, out of this photograph is the altar. But in the side there is a transept, okay? And another wheel window, okay, just like the one in the front of the building and the facade. And below this really large and really impressive wheel window, there is a life-size statue of Jesus crucifix. Okay, close-up of the wheel window. Now, in Europe, when you have a wheel window, rose window, usually there are 3 vertical sections below. In the United States, that's not true. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. Now, this is geometric. This is not figurative. No scenes from Jesus' life. Geometric. So stencils are used here. So you have clear glass and then stenciling and enamel paint on the glass. So let me show you a closer look yet. Here we go. Just imagine the hours involved in this. It's just incredible. Okay, and here's the crucifix. Okay, pulpit. This is where the gospel is read and so forth. So in the background here, you see those graffito murals. Okay, and here is the pulpit. Now, traditionally, there are 4 carvings on the pulpit, 4 evangelists, okay, the 4 gospel writers. This one is a bit unusual. In addition to the 4 gospel writers, the evangelists, there's also Christ depicted with his sacred heart. So let me show you a close-up of this. So there's on the far left there, it's the Sacred Heart. But here we have 2 of the 4 gospel writers, the evangelists. These happen to be John and Mark. How can you tell? We don't know what they look like. Usually St. John is depicted as a young man without a beard. But more importantly, notice the animals at the bottom of each wooden statue. Okay, with John you have an eagle, and Mark you have a lion. So here's a close-up of the carving. Just wow. And there's actually a winged lion, symbol for St. John. Okay, here's the Sacred Heart, close up there. All I can say is, wow. Okay, nave. All right, this is where the pews are located. Nave comes from the Latin word navis, which means ship. And if you take the shape of the ship and you turn it upside down, this is what you have. Okay, you've got a pointed roof here. That would be, the bottom of the ship and so forth. Okay, so in the nave here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bays, and again, each bay is is rounded arch with here happen to be brick columns. All right. Over each bay, there are 2 clear story windows and 2 figurative windows. We do not know who the artists were. There was a flood and a lot of important records were lost. We're pretty sure these are German windows, windows from probably from Germany. Okay, and let's look at some close-ups here. So here are the clear story windows, again with stenciling. 10 of those, and a series of figurative windows. All right. So here we have again the Annunciation. In this case, Gabriel is on the left. Okay, and notice on Gabriel's head, sort of a crooked, there's a flame. Okay, that's symbolic of the Holy Spirit, the 3rd person in the Holy Trinity. And then with Mary on the right, there is, again, Holy Spirit, this time instead of flame, in the shape of a dove, Holy Spirit. Okay, the next scene is the Nativity. We saw one before, but in this instance, we have 3 shepherds. Notice the shepherd's crook, that staff there. There we go. Joseph is usually depicted with a staff also. Well, his is flowering. So here's a close-up of the shepherds. So a lot of this would be painted, the enamel, clear glass. Next, Jesus is born, he's a young baby. He's presented in typical Jewish style in the temple. And here we don't see the rabbi, but instead we see, oh, by the way, but notice in the lower left, okay, little box there, that's sacrificial doves. This is the payment to the rabbi. But as I say here, we have Simeon. and he's in the Bible, and he believed that he would someday see the Messiah. And there he is, quite excited to see the Messiah. Okay, Holy Family, and again, notice the dove there. And the staff that Joseph carries, his flowers. Okay, he's the only saint depicted with a staff, a flowering staff. Okay. By the way, notice the overall shape here. Okay, so rounded arch at the top, and actually two rounded arches below that. But it's sort of an architecture. It's like a building. Okay. When we saw the graffito murals, the scenes were just sort of floating in air. Here, these are not floating; these are grounded in a building. Again, this is a typical German stylistic device. One of the reasons we feel these made by Germans. So here, Jesus, older now, is learning his father's trade, carpentry. Okay, so he has a saw, and then Joseph has a saw. Okay, Mary looking on. And this is a close-up of part of the one we just saw. There's the saw, and there's a staff, flowering staff, although it doesn't really look like a staff at this point. Okay, so Jesus now grows up, he leaves home, and he is baptized by his cousin John. And this is sort of the first manifestation of his life work, okay, the reason he was born. And here you have, do I have a close-up? Yes. Okay, here is, notice the dove again. How can you tell this is John the Baptist? Well, first of all, he's the one who is pouring water on Jesus. And notice his staff, and it says, H.A. Agnus Dei, behold the Lamb of God. He is announcing that his cousin is, in effect, the Messiah. Okay? The other way you can tell that this is John the Baptist is like what he is wearing. That is a camel hair shirt. Very itchy, very unpleasant, but sacrificing and so forth. So, baptism. Okay, then while Jesus is doing his, fulfilling his prophecy here, okay, we see him with the children. And I think the clothing is just magnificent. Stained glass, yeah, unreal. Faces, expert, just tremendous artwork here. Towards the end of his life, Jesus gives St. Peter the keys to heaven. And of course, there are lots of jokes about going to heaven and meeting St. Peter and so forth. But in the biblical version, here is Jesus giving the symbolic keys to heaven. Jesus is crucified. He is buried in a cave. Everyone leaves. And the next day or that night, he comes out. He's not dead, risen again, resurrected, and the Roman soldiers are dismantled, so to speak, and it's no longer on earth. Okay, the last scene here is Christ giving flowers to a saint, and that's Saint Teresa, later became known as Saint Teresa of the Little Flowers. And again, there's a reference to the architectural canopies that I mentioned earlier. Close up. Wow. And that is it. Okay, Dennis, your turn.
Well, put that last slide back up, Chuck.
I can do that.
I like you, you marvel at the depth of the colors that you've been able to capture with your photography. Well done. How, that's just not paint on glass, is it? I mean, without too much detail, how is this woven in and lasts, for such long periods of time?
Well, there's a combination. Sometimes you just have clear glass and enamel is applied. Sometimes there is stained glass, particular color, and that's cut and used. All those black lines would be cane, would be holding all the glass together. And sometimes there's paint applied to that. So there's a combination. The faces, of course, are hand painted. Faces, hands, and usually feet. Okay.
Mhm.
One of the tremendous advances in stained glass history occurred in the United States. There were two stained glass artists, Lafarge and Tiffany, who discovered how to have more than one color in a single piece of stained glass. Okay. And that sort of revolutionized the industry. But in spite of that, there were still a lot of 19th century and even 20th century artists who, used paint in addition to the multicolored stained glass.
Mhm.
Okay.
And Chuck, you've traveled all around the world. You take a lot of photographs. They're on your site. And my read of it is that you've tried to connect the architecture here in Buffalo with inspirational architecture elsewhere. Can you comment on that? Where does Buffalo fit relative to representing global art, if you will, right here in Buffalo?
Okay, once I retired and got serious about becoming an architectural historian, um, the more photographs, the more I learned about architecture in Buffalo, it led me to, of course, learn about the history. So to learn more about the history of Buffalo architecture, my wife and I took a number of tours, especially in Europe. And what I was always looking for were pieces, details that I recognized from Buffalo architecture. So I photographed these, and if you go on my website, you'll see architectural details identified in the dictionary. And then in the dictionary, I give examples not only from Buffalo, but from around the world. And, we think of European cathedrals, for example, these huge, incredibly gorgeous cathedrals and so forth. But what we fail to remember is that these were national or very important sites for travelers. Okay, and if you look at smaller churches in smaller towns, or even smaller churches in large cities, a lot of these are pretty comparable to what you have in Buffalo. So what happened was, the U.S. is an incredible number of immigrants from around the world. And when immigrants go to another country, they start with their own clothing. They keep their recipes, food, and so forth, and architecture and design. They imitate what they grew up with, what they are used to. So a lot of the churches in Buffalo really could be transplanted to other countries, and in terms of quality and so forth, they would be comparable. And in terms of stained glass windows, I mean, we have a really impressive amount of stained glass. You mentioned Explore Buffalo before. We had visitors from the South who've never been to the North before, and they go into the Buffalo churches, and they are just their mouths, their jaws drop. This is 19th century stuff. If you're living in the South, and the earliest history you have is the 1920s. You don't have the kind of architecture. You don't have the same kind of art, stained glass windows. And I mentioned before Lafarge and Tiffany. There are only 3 churches in the entire country that have examples of both those artists. And Buffalo has one, okay? And the number of Tiffany windows is just astounding, and more than just Tiffany. So when there are national conventions in Buffalo, stained glass, people from around the country are constantly astounded by the artwork. I remember one convention, tourist group, and they kept asking, well, who did these windows? And I tell them who the artists were. So, well, who's that? Well, they were Buffalo. But who are these people? I mean, why aren't they nationally known? It's kind of astounding, and it's kind of fun, actually, to discover what we have here in Buffalo.
Well, you've been helping us do just that, Chuck. The same architect did Corpus Christi as well as Assumption. But was that model based on specific churches in Poland, for instance?
Sometimes we are able to identify specific churches in Europe that were copied. Okay, sometimes we're not. All right. The answer to your question is I don't know. I don't know.
Any particular city, Krakow or something like that has something similar. All right. I know Atlanta now has something very similar to a church that's been closed here in Buffalo, was going to be literally dismantled and sent at one point, but now it's replicated in the Atlanta area. So
Right.
People want that legacy idea that Buffalo does provide, and we hopefully continue to appreciate, or frankly, they'll disappear on us. It's as simple as that.
Well, a little footnote here. In the 50s, there were a number of burglaries, stained glass windows being stolen, especially in Forest Lawn Cemetery, where there are a number of Tiffany's in mausoleums and so forth. And I'm told there's a surprisingly large number of Buffalo stained glass windows in Texas, Texas homes where they were sold. Well.
Well, it's right. You hope that they at least note their origins when they're.
The Martin House is slowly getting more and more windows from around the country.
Yeah,
being returned.
That's the beauty of that particular building too, the Martin House. That
Yes.
It helped revive our understanding and interest, along with the restoration now of the Richardson complex. Buffalo became aware. We were told to go up in the attic and see what you got up there, and we discovered great treasures. And we've been busy since the 80s and 90s to restore them and make sure they're available for future generations to enjoy as we have. So, Chuck, thank you very much. We're going to bring you back later in the season and do some of the programs that you have been giving as live lectures and turn them into YouTube productions here. So folks, stay tuned for that. In the meantime, you were on when we did the 600 programs at the downtown library. So you're on there last fall, YouTube, that really describes how to navigate your Buffalo AH website. So I encourage people to check that website out, and buffaloah.com, and check out the YouTube from the library. It's on their YouTube channel. As I say, I think it was November, December in that time period. We did it of last year. So you're a treasure yourself, Chuck, and I've appreciated.
As are you, Dennis. Keep up your great work, please.
Well, you're kind. Thank you. We both try. Folks, that does it. Thank you for watching. Remember, today's program can also be found as an audio podcast, along with over 1,500 other ImagineLifelongLearning.com programs. Simply go to the Internet Archive and search for C-SAAHN, and I'll say it slowly: C, capital C dash capital S-A-A-H-N, C-SAAHN. That stands for the Center for the Study of Art, Architecture, History, and Nature. You'll find over 1,500 recordings from Buffalo and Chautauqua since 2010 on that C-SAAHN network as part of the Buffalo-Chautauqua idea and connection. We've been exploring that since 2010, and this program is a component of that exploration. I'm Dennis Galecki. Be well and good day.